In a small, quiet town, where the streets were lined with whispering trees and friendly neighbors kept a watchful eye on one another, a young girl named Lily lived with her parents in a cozy little house. Their home was a simple one, painted a soft shade of yellow with white shutters that made it stand out against the green grass. There were flower beds brimming with daisies and roses in the front yard, flourishing under the care of Lily and her mother. The smell of blooming flowers filled the air, creating an inviting atmosphere. One evening, the sun dipped low in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and purple. As darkness quietly crept in, Lily was getting ready for bed. The familiar routines of brushing her long, dark hair while surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals, Bear and Bunny, were comforting. She stood in front of a tall, old mirror that hung on her wall, a mirror that had been in her family for generations. It was framed in an ornate design, though the gold had dulled over time, making it look almost antique. As she brushed her hair, Lily's eyes were drawn to the reflection in the mirror. It showed her image quite well, with her dark hair falling softly around her shoulders and her bright blue pajamas snug and warm. But something felt awry, like an unsettling shadow lurking in the corners of her room. Lily swept the brush through her hair, and as she did, she noticed something odd. There was a slight delay in her reflection, as if it were watching her with purpose, mimicking her every movement a heartbeat later. Puzzled, she tilted her head to the side, watching her mirrored self copy her actions but with a strange pause. Strange, she muttered under her breath, a sense of fear creeping up her spine like a cold wind. Setting down the brush, she reached for her lavender nightgown, its fabric soft and inviting against her skin. As she slipped the gown over her head, the mirror showed an odd version of this simple act, one that seemed distorted and delayed, the sleeves unfurling awkwardly in the reflection. Even after she tucked her long hair behind her ear, her reflection lingered, its eyes wide in disbelief, as if it were lost in contemplation. The moment felt uncanny, as though the mirror had sprouted a life of its own. Lily blinked, hoping the discomfort would fade, but as she opened her eyes again, the reflection was no longer truly her reflection, it was a twisted version of herself. It made a face that mirrored her own expression but exaggerated it, a wide-eyed look of shock that chilled her heart. Her heartbeat quickened, racing in her chest like a frightened bird. She recalled the scary movies her friends loved to watch, stories filled with ghosts and monsters that haunted dark corners. Yet here, in her own room, the terror was real, shaping and choking the air around her. She caught her breath, wrestling with the thought of fear. Was it simply her imagination playing tricks on her? Or was something truly wrong with the figure staring back at her? The energy in the room felt thick and twisted, swirling like dark fog creeping in from the corners of her mind. Finally dismissing the unsettling incident as a product of her overly vivid imagination, Lily crawled under her covers. The gentle creak of the floorboards beneath her parents' feet hovered outside her door, their soft voices a lullaby of comfort amidst her growing dread. Yet, the shadows in her room felt heavier, as if they were gathering, waiting for an opportunity to pounce upon her at any moment. She peeked at her reflection one last time before closing her eyes. The girl looking back at her seemed different, her eyes sparkled with something dark, something unholy that sent shivers down Lily's spine. The image curled in her mind like a vine wrapping tighter around her heart. That night, Lily tossed and turned beneath the covers, where shadows danced along the walls like mischievous spirits. Time blurred as she struggled to shake off the echoes of dread that lingered like a heavy fog around her. The image of her reflection haunted her dreams, flickering ominously at the back of her mind, mixing truth with fiction until she couldn't tell where her nightmare ended and reality began. Each time she drifted off, the reflection played tricks on her, spinning dark and twisted tales of things that could happen, like shadows whispering secrets meant only for her. It tormented her until morning came, and the sun's pale light filtered through her curtains like a hesitant visitor, illuminating her bedroom with a soft glow. Rubbing her tired eyes, she recounted the terrors of her dreams, trying to push them away. With a deep breath, she forced herself out of bed and approached the mirror once more, half expecting it to leap out and grab her. Yet this time, the girl in the mirror stood still, her face a mask of serenity but her eyes still glinting with an unsettling presence. It sent a chill straight through Lily, crashing down to her bones. Gripped by fear yet unable to tear herself away, she watched the figure in the mirror. There was something almost alive in the way her mirrored self stared back at her, unblinking and eerily calm. Her heart raced, pounding like a wild drum in her chest. She felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, a desperate wish breaking through her voice. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking, "move." But the reflection remained still, a twisted and grotesque replica of her, frozen in the air between them. Days turned into weeks, each passing day morphing into a canvas of torment for Lily. The reflection began to mirror her actions less and less. It shifted from the playful mimicry she had always known to a haunting stillness that sent shivers down her spine. Friends noticed her pallor, the dark circles forming under her eyes, but she shrugged their comments off with nervous laughter, a thin veil hiding the spiraling panic that gripped her heart. She would smile, but it felt like a mask too tight to wear. Her once comforting surroundings transformed into a maze of dread, tainted by the cursed frame that held her likeness within it. The paintings on the walls, once bright and cheerful, seemed to flicker with shadows, distorting the world she knew into something dark and unfriendly. Her favorite bedtime stories became tales of unhappiness instead, and even the laughter they used to enjoy felt distant and hollow. Lily's parents, concerned by her strange behavior, asked her what was wrong, but their questions, laced with genuine care, couldn't cut through the fog of fear that now enveloped her. They watched her retreat into silence, unable to address the mounting dread that had become a constant companion. Every night, Lily spent hours pondering what lay behind the glass, what darkness lurked in the shimmer of that unfamiliar world. Driven by sheer determination and an unquenchable sense of dread, she started studying every crevice of the mirror, searching for signs of darkness. One fateful evening, as thunder cracked the sky and rain lashed against the windows like a furious beast, calling for attention, Lily sat in front of the mirror again, summoning all the courage she could muster. Daring herself, she leaned closer, peering into the depths of the reflective surface. For a moment, she felt weightless, as if she were hovering just beyond the edge of reality. The air crackled with energy, and the thunderstorm outside added to the tension that built in her chest. There in the mirror, the edges of her reflection began to shimmer. There were folds of shadow that danced like smoke, intertwining and pulling together, becoming something almost tangible. Lily's heart raced as she watched. The figure mimicked her, yet now there was a shimmer of something else, a glint of mischief or perhaps malice? It felt like a flicker of lightning striking deep within her very soul. Something shifted, and Lily recoiled for a moment, trying to step back from what she feared she might witness. But her feet felt heavy, they were locked in place, glued by a fear she couldn't name. She felt a strange pull, as if the mirror was drawing her in, whispering her name in a voice she could almost understand, calling to her the way the moon calls a tide. "Who are you?" Lily whispered, her voice barely a tremor against the roaring thunder. The reflection didn't answer her in words, but something in its stillness began to awaken a deep-seated curiosity. With courage flickering in her heart, she leaned even closer, her breath fogging the glass. "What do you want from me?" she insisted, her tone stronger this time, pushing back against the whirlpool of her fear. But as she looked, she noticed the faintest hint of a smile curling the reflection's lips, a smile that sent a chill gnawing at her insides, like the wind whispering through trees in the dead of night. Unbeknownst to the girl in the mirror, Lily commanded attention with an unwavering gaze, even as doubt and terror battled for dominion within her spirit. The storm outside raged on, yet in her heart, she knew she had to confront the growing darkness. Whatever energy lurked within that tarnished frame had bonded with her, and she was determined to uncover its secret. This newfound resolve washed over her. She would no longer hide behind laughter or nervously averted glances. She took one step closer, the air around her thick with uncertainty and the promise of the unknown. Each heartbeat seemed to echo in the silence as she summoned the courage to face whatever might come next. Perhaps, in facing the reflection that haunted her dreams, she would finally find a way to dispel the darkness that threatened to engulf her life. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stormy sky and surrounded by the shadows creeping through her room, the battle between light and darkness began, one determined young girl against what awaited her on the other side of the mirror, where the lines of reality blurred and fear loomed large. Lily pressed her palm against the cold glass of the mirror, her heart racing as she gazed into its depths. For the first time, the reflection smiled back at her. But it wasn't the friendly smile of a loved one or the joyful grin of a friend. No, it was a slow, predatory grin that curled and twisted into something grotesque, sending shivers down her spine. Her heart dropped like a stone into a deep, dark well. In that moment, she felt increasingly haunted, as if an invisible force lurked near, watching her with eyes that were not her own. Could it be that this reflection was more than just an image? Could it possibly feel emotions just like she did? Was it a sentient being, a creature of darkness that waited patiently to unsettle her? It slithered within the shadows, mocking her in ways she couldn't understand, twisting her thoughts and filling her mind with an ever-growing dread, a feeling as familiar to her as her own laughter used to be. Time rolled on. Days turned into maddening weeks, dragging on like a slow, heavy fog that refused to lift. Lily found herself becoming obsessed with the mirror. She couldn't help it. No matter where she went in her small room, her eyes would drift back to that reflective surface, drawn in like a moth to a flickering flame. Each time she passed it, it seemed to reach out to her, calling her to dig deeper into the layers of reality. The air around her was thick with unspoken threats, and her skin prickled as if she were being watched. It felt like the walls were closing in, suffocating her in their silent embrace. Finally, one afternoon, curiosity bubbled up inside Lily, overpowering her sense of caution. In a moment of reckless bravery, or was it sheer madness? She found herself speaking aloud to the darkened glass. "Is this a game to you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. She half expected the reflection to answer her, to leap out of the mirror and pull her into its sinister world. But it was silent, merely gazing back at her with cold, calculating eyes. She could see its dark pupils narrowing, filled with an unquenchable hunger for freedom that flared like a ravenous fire. This mirror was not just a piece of glass, it had become a grotesque portal, a window into something hellish that lingered just out of her sight. Every day, the reflection seemed to grow bolder, creeping closer to the surface of her reality. Lily could feel an unsettling sense of foreboding settling in her heart, creeping like icy fingers around her chest and squeezing tighter with each encounter. It was as if the reflection was playing a game, a hide-and-seek of sorts, where she was desperately searching for answers, and the reflection was hiding the truth behind its malevolent smile. As days slipped into weeks and weeks into months, these eerie encounters began to chip away at Lily's sanity. School turned into a blur of sounds and faces that had no meaning. She could barely focus on her lessons, her mind continuously wandering back to the dark figure in the mirror. Friends would call her name, their voices ringing like cheerful bells, and they would smile, inviting her to join them in playing games or sharing laughter. But dread clung to her like a warm, heavy blanket, isolating her from all the joy that once filled her life. An overwhelming sense of betrayal lodged firmly in her heart as she pondered her friends' carefree laughter. Could they ever understand the darkness creeping into her life? Could they ever grasp the fear she felt whenever she looked into that mirror, the mirror that had become a portal to something far worse than she could ever imagine? One fateful day, as she slumped on her bed, weighed down by fatigue that made her eyes feel heavy, an unmistakable voice echoed through the room. It was guttural and sinister, reverberating through the air like a blasphemous chant, wrapping around her heart with icy fingers. "Let me out," Lily gasped, her chest tightening as if iron bands were tightening around her. She stumbled backward, confusion mingling with terror. The image in the mirror shifted again, and she could see that malevolent smile creeping across its features. It was too much to bear. "What do you want?" she cried, her voice growing louder. But the reflection didn't answer her. It simply continued to stare back at her, its smile widening to reveal a jagged array of teeth, sharp and menacing, as if ready to tear apart the very fabric of her fear. Lily staggered back, her pulse racing wildly in her ears, still unable to break eye contact. She felt as though something terrible was brewing just beneath the surface. An overwhelming urge to flee surged through her, but her body refused to move. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the ominous image before her, knowing deep inside that something was about to change for her forever. In a moment of desperate courage, she accidentally stumbled over a stray book, sending it crashing to the floor. The sound filled the room, shattering the heavy silence that had wrapped around her. The air turned thick with dread, and Lily fought against the impulse to flee as she clenched her fists in a determined act of resistance. Steeling herself, she leaned closer to the mirror, trembling with fear but feeling strangely brave all at once. She spoke again, her voice quaking with uncertainty. "What do you want?" "Your soul," it hissed back, each word echoing like a cold wind spiraling down into her thoughts. The reflection's eyes glinted with an otherworldly darkness, something so sinister and wrong that she felt the bile rise in her throat. Gripping the edge of the sink, she forced herself not to turn away, despite the sickening fear that threatened to engulf her. As if sensing her fear, the grotesque creature in the mirror began to shift and writhe, distorting into something shapeless and dark. It was both her and not her, all at once. The more she stared, the more her mind twisted, struggling to separate herself from what was now appearing in front of her. It was a dance of identities, a grotesque fusion that thrived on dread and darkness. Lily's heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning out all rational thought. She backed away, pressing her back against the wall as terror coursed through her veins like ice. The reflection stood before her, a reminder that her freedom was slipping away, replaced by something dreadful and twisted. She could feel her breath hitching in her throat as hopelessness washed over her like a wave. Every single day spent in front of that mirror felt like a countdown, a cruel ticking clock counting down to a moment when she feared she might lose herself entirely to the sinister entity lurking just beyond the glass. She could not comprehend the depths of what she was facing, how such a small thing could hold so much power over her life and mind. But even as fear seeped deep into her bones, a flicker of a question sparked in her mind. Was there any way to fight it? Could she find a way to push back against its darkness and reclaim the light that once filled her heart? As the thought formed, a glimmer of hope began to stir within her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny spark of bravery. Perhaps she could understand this dark reflection. Perhaps the game it was playing could be turned back upon itself. With her heart pounding in her ears, Lily knew she had to find out what this reflection truly wanted. She had to confront the darker side of herself, to figure out if she could bring light back to her life and shatter the power that this sinister force held over her. Little did she know that this journey would test her in ways she never imagined, forcing her to dig deep within to uncover the truth hidden beneath shadows. The reflection may have twisted her fears and darkened her world, but it was Lily's heart that remained unbroken, and she was determined to fight back. As the days changed, weaving themselves into a frightening routine, Lily felt herself drifting further and further away from her old life. At first, she tried to hold on to her joy, but soon the horror of her mirror became too overwhelming. It gnawed at her spirit, like a hungry animal searching for something to devour. Friends who once brought her laughter now felt like distant memories, like echoes in a dark tunnel that whispered her name and then faded into silence. Every conversation she had felt empty, as if those words held no meaning anymore. The familiar faces at school seemed to hover above her like ghosts, spiraling towards her like swirling leaves caught in a wild autumn wind. They once brought her comfort, but now they felt cold and distant, reminders of everything she had lost. The laughter that used to bounce through the corridors of school felt muffled, like she was trapped inside a glass box, listening to joy on the outside while her world twisted into a chilling nightmare. Shadows of impending doom wrapped around her like a thick, heavy fog, making her feel trapped and alone. One autumn evening, the atmosphere turned heavy and thick. The day had been gray, and as night approached, the air outside was damp and filled with the smell of wet leaves. Wind whipped through the trees, making the branches creak and groan, while the window rattled against the gusts. In the dim light of her room, the mirror stood there, glimmering like polished silver, calling her closer. It felt as if the glass was alive, pulsing and alive with dark energy. Lily felt a surge of wild desperation wrapping around her heart, urging her to approach. "I can't just let you have me," she whispered, her voice soft, almost breaking. It felt as if the reflection pulsed with excitement, taunting her with its power, a reminder of the dark force lurking behind its smooth surface. "Then come dance with me," it whispered back, its voice sweet and curling like smoke in the air, pulling her in. The reflection moved smoothly within the frame, enticing her to join in a twisted dance that blurred the lines of reality. It felt like she was being drawn into some strange performance, where the boundaries of space and time began to waver. Just then, she realized how dangerous this could become. The fingers of despair curled around her, threatening to pull her into a whirlpool of darkness. But deep inside her, a small flame of hope flickered, fiercely struggling against the alluring pull of despair. Each time she tried to resist, it felt as if she was battling a giant, and the effort weighed heavily on her soul. Lily could feel her emotions brewing behind her eyes, hot like molten lava, threatening to spill over in tears, but they refused to escape. Instead, They trapped her beneath layers of sadness and anguish. With all her strength, she shouted, "Leave me alone." Her fists were clenched so tightly it felt as though she might break something. But the reflection stood unmoved, smirking at her defiance, that haunting grin wide across its face. "Your soul, dear Lily," it hissed, each word dripping with a hunger so fierce it sent shivers down her spine. The realization dawned upon her like a clap of thunder in a silent sky. She was caught in the grip of something truly evil, a darkness that lurked far beyond her understanding. As the days passed, conformity crept into her life, making it seem inevitable. Time was relentless, and she found her world turning dull and gray. The bright colors of her childhood faded away, echoes of laughter and joy heard only in memories now shadowed with sorrow. Even her thoughts turned monochrome, coated in sadness that weighed on her heart. She began to imagine new ways to change her room. A splash of color here, a vibrant poster there, but each time she tried to infuse life into her space, the reflection snickered softly from the glass, wrapping tighter around her mind, absorbing her spirit, draining her brightness and leaving behind a lingering sense of emptiness. Night after night transformed into a haunting routine. There were evenings when she would drift into sleep, but it was never peaceful. She tossed and turned, caught in a battle against dreams that blurred the lines between comfort and horror. Each time she surfaced from those restless nights, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, the memories of her faint laughter mingled with the creeping presence of the reflection stalking her in her dreams. The looming shadow invaded the corners of her mind, whispering gentle promises of freedom if only she would choose to let go of her light. Despite the raging storm inside her, she began to realize that it would never be satisfied until it swallowed every single piece of her happiness. Just when she thought she had found a flicker of defiance, her hope would dim, submerged beneath waves of dread. Finally, one fateful evening arrived, heavy with exhaustion and despair. She could feel the weight of hopelessness draping over her like a thick, dark blanket. With her resolve fraying at the edges, Lily decided it was time to confront the reflection once again. Tentatively, she stepped toward the mirror, her legs feeling like lead as dread coiled around her heart. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quaking with fear, each word layered with desperation. The reflection twisted itself into a grotesque version of what she knew, grinning wide, as if delighting in every moment of suffering it had created. "Now, you will join me," it exhaled, the icy breath curling in the air like a serpent, wrapping around her. In that moment, something surged within her, a flicker of understanding, a realization that the reflection was everything she had ever feared losing. It wasn't just a dark creature, it was a representation of her despair, a manifestation of her deepest worries, waiting to devour her sparkle. Yet at the same time, each flicker of emotion she felt was met with a hungry power that drained her spirit further. It fed on the pieces of her she had worked so hard to protect. Like a wolf circling its prey, the reflection thrived on her unraveling spirit, savoring every pang of hurt that unfurled within her. In a final act of courage, Lily lunged fiercely at the mirror with every ounce of energy left in her thin frame. She aimed to shatter the glass, hoping to break free from the grip of despair. But lightning struck. She felt the glass ripple ominously, as if it were alive and pushing against her efforts. The pull of something dark and twisted dragged her closer, woven deeply into the very fabric of her being. With a mix of fear and fierce resolve in her heart, she grasped the edges of reality and plummeted into the tumultuous depths that lay beyond the glass. The shattering noise merged with the hollow thump of her heartbeat. It echoed in her mind as she realized this reflection would not let go so easily. The pieces of shattered glass splintered across her mind, while the creature inside cackled with delight, hungry for more. Yet as the shards of glass fell away, swimming around her in a storm of chaos, something deep inside Lily urged her onward. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that even in her darkest moments, there was a flicker of light inside, a hope worth fighting for. Each shard of shattered glass represented every moment she had fought through, a testament to her strength through the storm. The reflection clung to her fears, but with each step she took toward facing it, she could feel the power of the darkness beginning to fade. With a heart filled with newfound determination, she pushed through the swirling blackness, believing that even in despair, hope could shine once again. Little did she know, every brave thought pushed her further into her own light, and as she took her stand, she was not simply breaking the mirror, she was reclaiming her own essence, piece by piece. As shards of glass fell like broken dreams, they seemed to glimmer for a moment, creating colorful sparkles that danced through the air, bright and beautiful. It was like 1,000 tiny stars had shattered and scattered across the floor of her room. But this moment of beauty quickly faded away like mist in sunlight, replaced by something awful and terrifying. The slivers of glass twisted into a strange reflection, morphing into something that felt everything but familiar. Instead of her cheerful, smiling face, the mirror now showed a monstrous version of Lily. This reflection had wide, wild eyes filled with a crazed energy that looked hungry and dark. Lily gasped as the world whirled around her like a storm, the air heavy with feelings of dread. The reflection grinned wider, its jagged teeth gleaming, as if it were celebrating her misfortune. Lily felt the warmth of her happiness being drained away, leaving only a cold emptiness that settled deep inside her. It felt as if something was swallowing her hope, devouring the light that once filled her heart. A horrific realization crashed over her like a wave. Every struggle she made only seemed to give strength to this dark creature that was now part of her. Trapped in a nightmare that wouldn't end, Lily's thoughts and memories began to twist into strange shapes that felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. She watched helplessly as her true self began to unravel, thread by thread. Each piece of her vibrant joy, which once bubbled like laughter, was being sucked away, leaving her a husk of what she used to be. It was as if her joyful spirit was being gobbled up, and in its place, she felt something sinister growing, taking root where innocence once lived. The mirror had morphed into something more than just glass. It was now a dark universe of despair, a sinister black hole that fed on her turmoil, relishing every instant of her decline. Lily was caught in this spell for what felt like an eternity. Days turned into weeks within the icy prison of the mirror, where shadows danced around her heart, gripping it so tightly that not even a whimper of protest escaped her lips. The reflection, now a grotesque shade of what she used to be, took on a life of its own, breathing with eerie satisfaction as it feasted on the remnants of her spirit. Each night, she fought to remember happy memories, but they slipped through her fingers like grains of sand, disappearing into the abyss that the reflection had created. Many long nights passed until finally, her parents returned home, filled with worry as they searched for their missing daughter. Their voices calling her name echoed through the empty halls of the house. They couldn't shake the gnawing fear that something terrible had happened. Whispers bloomed in the small town about the little girl who had vanished, leaving a wake of gloom behind her. People's eyes darkened with concern as they exchanged hushed words, suggesting an unseen force might be at play, something far beyond their understanding. Yet, in the entire town, no one thought to check the mirror that stood eerily still in her room. It shimmered silently, holding secrets that twisted around its edges. When her parents gathered the courage to glance inside, they found not their beloved daughter but an empty shell, a hollow reflection of a girl who had once danced with joy. The mirror gleamed with a sinister light, as though it held the very essence of darkness, relishing the fact that it had consumed Lily while the world around remained oblivious. Days crept into nights, and the mirror stood as an everlasting reminder of what had happened. Its darkened frame whispered false promises to those who dared glance too closely. The townsfolk grew cautious, warning their children to keep the lights on and the doors locked, murmurs of fear shivering in the air. Tales spread like wildfire, warning of things that lived within the surface of reflective glass. For deep down inside mirrors, it was said, hid the darkest fears, lurking patiently, waiting for a moment to strike. As the legend grew, children began to share stories late at night, their eyes wide with terror as they warned one another about the power of the crescent moon. They believed that at this special time, mirrors transformed into tricky portals that breathed life into shadows, shadows that wanted nothing more than to extinguish the glow of human light. Little did they know that this danger wasn't just fantasy, it was a reality that loomed just beyond their innocent grasp. Kids would gather in circles, sharing animated tales of those who challenged their fate only to become lost within their own reflections, just like Lily. Whispers filled the air, carrying the stories from one generation to the next, a warning wrapped in folklore. For any child who was curious enough to challenge the darkness might find themselves unable to escape its grip, wrapped tightly in the arms of despair. They stood at the edge of a great chasm, staring into the darkness that awaited them, unaware that their own twisted doppelgangers were lurking just beyond the surface, waiting for the chance to replace them forever. The townsfolk began to notice strange occurrences as well. Silly mischiefs and sudden strange happenings were brushed off at first, but as time passed, they all began to feel the weight of unease suffocating their home. Children would wander too close to the mirror, feeling its pull, yet snapping back just in time, heart-pounding with fear. Each close encounter felt like an aura of dread hovered nearby, whispering warnings that only the brave would ignore. As the crest of the full moon approached, parents began to strategize for the safety of their children. They would check every corner of the house, ensuring that mirrors had been covered with cloths and tucked away, hidden from prying eyes. "Keep your distance," they said, glancing nervously at the reflective surfaces that were once thought of as beautiful. But how could they protect what they couldn't fully understand? As instinct took over, the essence of fear spread through the town, becoming a part of their lives. Days turned into weeks as stories of the cursed mirror grew in intensity, and soon, no child dared to be alone in a room with one. They rallied together, holding hands tightly, frightened of the tales they had exchanged. The sacrifice of Lily loomed heavy in the heart of the town, her absence felt in the laughter of children that had been dimmed, her spirit drifting like a fading song. But despite the fear that had gripped the town, there remained a few brave kids. They were filled with curiosity, a spark for adventure that made them yearn to uncover the secrets trapped within the mirror. On one starry night, cloaked in shadows, they gathered, whispering conspiratorial plans under the watchful gaze of the crescent moon. "We should find out what really happened to Lily," one of them suggested, heart racing in excitement and fear. The others nodded, yearning for excitement, yet their hearts pounded like drums against their ribs. With lanterns in hand, they tiptoed to Lily's old home, their breaths catching in their throats as they ascended the creaky stairs, heartbeats shaking in sync with the rattling of wood. The door to Lily's room stood ajar, a chill creeping through the crack in the frame. Slowly, they pushed it open, revealing the dimly lit space. The atmosphere felt thick, hovering with untold stories and whispered secrets. And there it was, the mirror, shrouded in shadows, standing as a portal to something unknown. As the light flickered between them, they gathered their collective courage. Unraveling the cloth from its surface felt like peeling back layers of fear. It revealed the glass that glimmered eerily, almost inviting. As one of the children gazed too closely, they felt an odd tug, a sensation like being pulled into another world. "Careful," another whispered, stepping back as if the mirror could explode into darkness. They quietly debated, their voices barely above a whisper. It was a risky move, challenging the dark being that had brought tales of despair. But their spirit of adventure outweighed caution, and curiosity beckoned them closer. They decided to stick together, holding hands as they formed a line before the mirror. One brave girl took a deep breath and stepped forward, reaching a trembling hand to touch the cold surface. It rippled beneath her fingertips like water, and for a heartbeat, they thought they saw Lily's face reflected there. Only it shimmered with anguish, her eyes begging for help. The children gasped as the world around them swayed and twisted, and they squeezed each other's hands tighter. Something dark throbbed beneath the reflective surface, alive and waiting. Summoning their courage, they called out, "Lily, we're here, we want to help you." The room echoed with their brave words, trembling in the stillness. Suddenly, an icy wind howled through the cracks, as shadows surged around their feet like smoke. It distorted the very air around them, creating eerie shapes that seemed to whisper just beyond comprehension. The shadows flickered, revealing glimpses of Lily's trapped essence, her laughter, her joy, and then, her sorrow as the darkness surged forward. That moment was both terrifying and intoxicating, like being caught between two worlds at once. They felt it, the swirl of light and dark, hope and despair. "We can bring you back," they yelled, their voices trembling but filled with determination. As they focused together on Lily's essence, threads of warmth radiated from their hands, twinkling against the cold gloom. As they joined their hearts and minds, a flicker of light struggled against the shadows within the glass. They could see Lily's trapped reflection, caught in anguish, her memories tumbling around, lost in confusion. "Hold on, Lily," they shouted, their determination strong. With sheer willpower, they poured all their love and memories into the mirror, images of dancing in the sun, of laughter in the cool breeze, of the times they'd spent together. The dark reflection raged against their unity, twisting and writhing as if trying to resist the light pouring through the cracks. But the children held strong. They would not let it win. It was then that they felt it, Lily's spirit reaching back, pulling from the depths of sorrow, a spark igniting like fireworks in the sky. "I'm coming." Her voice echoed faintly, filled with hope. Together, they began to see Lily's true form taking shape. As they called for her, the dark reflections screamed, twisting more violently. For a moment, it felt as if the world around them might explode. But the light surged within them, pushing back against the shadows, defying the dark force that had taken hold. With a final heave of shared courage, they reached out, pulling with everything they had. And just like that, the reflection cracked like glass beneath their hands, shattering into shimmering pieces that fell to the ground like stars raining down upon the earth. With a flash of brilliant light, Lily burst forth, free from the mirror's clutches, her eyes wide and shining with gratitude. The shadows that had once enveloped her shrank back in terror, losing their hold on her spirit. "Thank you," she said breathlessly, her voice woven with relief and joy as she stood tall, embracing her essence once again. The children erupted in cheers and hugs, united in victory against the sinister force that had sought to invade their world. They felt Lily's warmth, her vibrant spirit alight with life once more. And as they celebrated, the air shimmered with a renewed sense of hope and possibilities, for shadows could only thrive in silence. Together, they uncovered the truth. The darkness could be faced, challenged, and shared, but only if they did so with love and courage. From that day on, tales of the brave children who freed Lily from the mirrored shadows spread throughout the town. The legend transformed into something powerful, a story that reminded everyone of the light that shone within them, a beacon against the darkness. Families learned to confront their fears, knowing that even in shadows, light would always find a way to shine. The mirror, once a vessel of despair, stood transformed into a symbol of hope, a reminder of the power of friendship and the importance of standing together against the things that frighten us. And though the moon continued to wane and wax in the sky, the children held on to their courage, knowing that together, they could face whatever shadows may come. That whisper of fear no longer held power over them, replaced by the bright thread of unity, binding their hearts as they turned towards new adventures filled with light. Lily, now forever free from the clutches of the past, would always be a cherished part of their stories, for the bond they created in that room was stronger than any reflection could ever be. Together, they would always remember and stay vigilant, for the most beautiful of lights often came from the darkest of nights.